the reins of the EU Council presidency, and it's facing a monumental task. In a joint speech by video link earlier, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen laid out their priorities for the next 6 months. Brexit, climate change and European unity were all mentioned, but tackling the COVID-19 pandemic and the financial recovery from it are top of the list. Ursula von der Leyen stressed there will be economic pain before things get better.
Every day we lose, we will be seeing people losing their jobs, companies going bust, the weakening of our economies. To succeed in this gigantic task, it takes not only the good steer of the German presidency, and we know that we can rely on that. It also requires all member states and stakeholders indeed to look beyond narrow interests and to focus on the benefits for our European Union.
Well, let's go over to our studio in the heart of the European Parliament, The Bridge, where we can speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, good to see you there, of course. What more did we learn from Germany today as it takes over the reins of Europe?
Well, just what an enormous task, in many ways, Angela Merkel has got on her hands, as you say, as Germany takes over the rotating presidency of the EU Council. It is a pretty big list that Angela Merkel is going to have to try and work through, not least of all because, you know, when you look at that recovery fund that Ursula von der Leyen was talking about, when you look at the economies across Europe that are facing their deepest recession potentially in the best part of 100 years, as businesses close and people lose their jobs, Europe can ill afford to wait for a deal, but it's going to be pretty difficult to get one, to get all countries to sign up to this recovery package, 750 billion euros, while at the same time also agreeing to a new EU budget due to kick in at the start of next year. So it is going to be a very, very difficult challenge. And you know what? Angela Merkel made it clear today that she understands that this is an historical challenge in many ways when she spoke also at that press conference following having had talks with Ursula von der Leyen.
We know that the European Union is in a tough situation, perhaps the most difficult in its modern history because of COVID-19. It's still present across the continent. We know that this virus is still here today, and we have to learn to live with it. It's proving to be extremely complicated. I'd like to thank Ursula von der Leyen, as she's made it clear we have to stay united, because of course, sometimes it's easier for countries to simply focus on themselves. But in this crisis, we have to show solidarity.
Cool. Well, let's get the thoughts now of one German MEP. He's a Christian Democrat, a bit like Angela Merkel, Andreas Schwab, and he joined us inside the European Parliament here. Thank you very much indeed, Andreas. Well, first of all, Angela Merkel is talking about, you know, what an enormous challenge this is, that Europe has not faced the European Union difficulties like this before. Is that a view you share?
Absolutely. We are in the deepest economic crisis that Europe in modern times has ever seen. And we have not yet found the recipe to get out of it. We have the package, but we have to find majorities for that package to be implemented, and member states have to do their own piece as well.
And how difficult is that going to be, given the fact that, you know, you've got the Netherlands, Austria, Denmark, Sweden, and potentially others saying that at the moment they can't support that deal?
Well, I think in Europe we have a very strong tool to use, and that's the tool of compromise. And I'm sure that the Commission has already prepared compromises that can find the way through. However, these countries have politically put a lot of pressure on the Commission not to broker such a deal. And now everyone expects that Angela Merkel is coming here from the 1st of July and tomorrow the problem is solved. I think things are more difficult, and we should not just speculate that Germany can solve every problem. It's difficult, and Angela Merkel will have to work hard, although I'm quite sure that she will manage to do that.
Well, Emmanuel Macron says he wants a deal this month. It's clear, as you say, given the scale of the recessions and the economic difficulty, you know, Europe can't really wait for ages for a deal. I mean, is one possible, do you think, this month?
It's possible because there is a very clear plan and a very strong problem and a very clear commitment of the European Commission. But we have to overcome the structural imbalances in the Council because it has been to be adopted by unanimity, and that's a very difficult task. I'm sure that Austria and the other frugal four, they want to also have a compromise. They want to balance the money in a better way from their point of view. Macron is pushing, and it's the right way to do, so that Merkel can, in the end, broker a deal. I hope that we can do it in July, because the longer we wait, the more difficult it will be for the economy to come back into normal phase.
I mean, it's not just, though, the pandemic and the economy that's on the kind of difficulties and the challenges that this presidency is facing. Also, we've got Brexit, for example. It seems today that talks have, again, slightly broken down with big differences on either side. Angela Merkel suggesting that, Germany, Europe can afford not to have a deal. It would be bad for them. But that, a no deal is still better than a bad deal, to quote a former British Prime Minister. I mean, are you concerned about Brexit?
But since years we are concerned about Brexit. We believe Britain will always be our neighbour, and we always will have an interest as European Union to have a friendly relation with that neighbour. The best for sure being Britain in the European Union, the best Britain being very close, so we will do the utmost to keep the Brits very close, but we cannot offer them what they want. We can offer them only something they understand, and we can communicate as well to our citizens, and that's a bit the problem that we are still faced with.
On terms of the climate and environment, and we look at the Green Deal, because there's still an awful lot of pressure on that. The Greens did very well in France at the weekend in regional elections. They're still polling pretty well in Germany too. I mean, do you think how important is it that the European Union doesn't lose sight of the environmental issues, even in the midst of this pandemic?
Well, obviously, our global climate doesn't wait for the pandemic situation or for our recovery deal. The climate is a concern to all European citizens. But what we have to do now is to find a smooth path out of the crisis, building on existing technologies and not reinventing the wheel from zero. And that's a very difficult way to go. And
just very, very finally, on Angela Merkel herself, this is probably the last time she's going to take over the rotating presidency. She is due to step aside next year. I mean, is this the right time? Is it, in the sense, Angela Merkel talks about this being the biggest challenge. She's seen many crises in Germany and in Europe. Can she steer Europe at this difficult time?
I think she can, she wants, and she has the power to do so. But in politics, one person is nothing. You need majorities. Therefore, I count on the European Council to create the majority and the unanimity they need.
Okay, Andreas Schwab, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Euronews. It is interesting, isn't it? You look at kind of Angela Merkel's political background and what she's had to deal with. She's seen the Eurozone crisis, the financial crisis, the migration crisis, the Brexit crisis, now this one. But she's pretty clear today, Tokes, that this is the biggest challenge to the European Union in its history. It's one that it can ill afford to get wrong. But you know what? Is it possible that they can do this deal in the next few weeks to get everyone on board? Well, that is going to be her biggest mission, Germany's biggest mission in many regards. It's not just down to one individual country, but clearly Europe needs leadership at this moment in time. Whether it will happen, whether those divisions will be overcome, well, we'll have to see when she comes here next week to visit the Parliament, the Commission and the Council, and indeed all EU leaders gather for that important EU summit in, 2 weeks' time.
Lots of challenges there facing the Chancellor. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor from The Bridge. Thank you. Still to come on the programme with coronavirus.